This is Jack Creel, and I'm going to be discussing flow through porous media. So we'll start with some important concepts and equations here. Just some basic terms to start off. It's important to understand some of the properties of the porous beds themselves. So the void fraction is going to be the ratio of open space to material space in the bed. You can see the material space is going to be the space occupied by these particles, and the open space will be between them. The particle diameter is an important measurement of the size of these particles in the bed, and the specific area is another. It's an inverse length measurement showing the ratio between the particle's surface area to its volume. So those are both going to be important for how the fluid stream interacts with these beds, because you can think, for example, if there's a bunch of small particles in there as opposed to just a few big ones, it's going to be very different for how the fluid stream interacts with them. And then you can see here how these two measurements are related. It's important to understand the different ways to measure velocity when you're talking about flow through porous media. The superficial fluid velocity is going to be a little bit easier to understand. It's analogous to velocities you'd use in other types of problems where it's just the volumetric flow rate over the area. So you can think of it as a type of average velocity because it'll be the velocity of the stream entering and leaving the bed, but it doesn't take into account all the factors inside the bed and how the fluid is moving inside the bed the way interstitial fluid velocity does. Because you can see interstitial fluid velocity takes into account the void fraction here, which will essentially be taking into account how the area is decreasing in that bed. And we know that when area decreases, a fluid stream has to speed up. So this fluid velocity will actually explain how the particles are moving within that porous bed. The Reynolds number is an important concept for any fluid stream, really, but you can see here this one is specialized for flow through porous media because it takes into account the void fraction, the particle diameter, some of those factors that are going to change how the particle is acting in that bed. Because the Reynolds number is just this dimensionless measurement of how turbulent or laminar the flow is. The Ergon equation is probably the most important equation that you're going to talk about when you're talking about flow through porous media. So it's important to understand it's just friction loss through this porous bed. But what's really cool about it is, unlike other equation, it takes into account both the laminar and turbulent contribution to the friction loss. So you can use it indiscriminately regardless of the nature of your flow, which really simplifies a lot of problems. And it also applies to any angle of flow.